Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. They say those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. It's something that Bangladesh needs to think about, where the new unelected rulers seem intent on erasing the past and undermining its lessons. Dhaka is cozying up to Pakistan. Tonight we'll tell you how and what kind of security and political implications it has for India. Will Donald Trump declare a national emergency and deploy the army to deport millions of people from America? We'll bring you his latest statements. The Ukraine war has completed 1,000 days, but now time is running out for Zelensky. We'll discuss why. Also bringing you highlights from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Brazil for the G20 summit. How China and India are in a race to lead the global south. What's the solution to Delhi's deadly pollution? Why Meta has been slapped with a $25 million fine in India. How the city of Hong Kong is dying a slow death. How Minecraft is moving from pixels to theme parks. And why emojis on school report cards is a good idea. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar meets his Chinese counterpart. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. They discussed the next steps in India-China relations, including the resumption of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and direct flights between the two countries. Was there another mass attack in China? Several children have been injured after a car crashed outside an elementary school. The incident took place in China's Hunan province. It is unclear whether the vehicle lost control or if the crash was deliberate. Just days ago, a driver had rammed his car into a crowd in southern China. Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit India soon. The Kremlin says it's working on finalizing the dates. Putin's visit is likely to be early next year. In October, the Russian leader had met Prime Minister Modi in Kazan for the BRICS summit. Putin last visited India in December 2021, just months before the Ukraine war began. Two undersea cables in the Baltic Sea damaged. One links Lithuania and Sweden, the other connects Finland and Germany. The disruptions come amid Western fears of a hybrid warfare and possible Russian interference with global undersea infrastructure. Somaliland's opposition leader wins the presidential election, promises to play a more unifying role than the outgoing president, who oversaw a controversial deal with Ethiopia earlier this year. In 1991, Somaliland declared its independence from Somalia. The self-proclaimed republic enjoys a strategic position in northwestern Somalia. And Elon Musk's SpaceX launches India's GSAT-N2 communications satellite into orbit. The satellite is expected to boost broadband services and in-flight connectivity across India. This is the first collaboration between SpaceX and India's space agency, ISRO. We begin with Bangladesh and Pakistan. Are they burying the hatchet and fixing ties? It was unthinkable under Sheikh Hasina, but now anything goes. Dhaka has just done something unprecedented, something that's never happened since 1971, since the year Bangladesh was born. They have allowed a Pakistani cargo ship to dock in Bangladesh. I know it sounds routine. It's anything but. Usually, Pakistani cargo is routed via a third country, maybe Singapore or Sri Lanka, but this time it sailed directly from Karachi to Chittagong, basically a direct sea link. The ship started its journey from the UAE. In Karachi, it loaded up cargo for Bangladesh, raw materials for Dhaka's garment industry. Then it headed straight to Bangladesh. The ship docked at the Chittagong port on the 13th of November. It has since left for Indonesia. Now, Pakistan is thrilled about this voyage. They're calling it a major step in boosting regional trade. They expect more such exchanges to follow, but this voyage does raise a couple of questions. One, why wasn't it done before? And two, why now? The answer to the first question is quite simple. Bangladesh used to be East Pakistan, but Islamabad tried to throttle Bengali culture and politicians, so East Pakistan wanted to break away. They were one country, East Pakistan wanted to separate. This led to military intervention by Pakistan's army. And they killed more than 3 million people in present-day Bangladesh. The Pakistani army killed more than 3 million people. They also raped more than 200,000 women. In simple words, they committed genocide. Something they haven't admitted or apologized for. Which is why Dhaka kept Pakistan at an arm's length. They did have trade relations, but no direct maritime links. So why now? Because this is Bangladesh 2.0. Sheikh Hasina has been toppled and exiled. Muhammad Yunus is the new interim chief, and he is keen on resetting ties with Pakistan. We saw that in September. Yunus was in New York for the UN General Assembly. While there, he met Shehbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and Sharif is more than eager to reciprocate. In September, he announced a new travel policy for Bangladeshis. They can now visit Pakistan without a visa. And now they can also trade directly. What explains the shift in policy? In one word, it is ideology. Sheikh Hasina was mindful of Bangladesh's history, of the atrocities committed by Pakistan. Muhammad Yunus is not. He wants to dismantle Bangladesh's liberation legacy, whether it's by removing public holidays linked to 1971 or taking down Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's pictures from government buildings. He wants Bangladesh to forget its past. The question, I guess, is how should India see this pivot? Should this worry New Delhi? Well, there are two factors to consider. The first is the security aspect. The second is the political. Let me take you back to the year 2004. Weapons were confiscated at the Chittagong port. Grenades, guns, rocket launchers. The whole thing was worth between $4.5 and $7 million. It was Bangladesh's largest weapons haul. And who was it meant for? Reports say insurgent groups in Assam. Apparently, it was masterminded by Pakistan's spy agency. And logically, it checks out. Bangladesh and Assam share a border. A 262-kilometer-long border. It is porous enough to smuggle arms. Sheikh Hasina, as Prime Minister, kept a watch on this trade. But again, Muhammad Yunus, the current in charge, is not. Last month, he announced a new decision. Goods from Pakistan will no longer be physically checked in Bangladesh. The previous regime used to check them. The Yunus regime will not. Now, on paper, the reason is to allow seamless trade. But for India, it will raise security concerns. So that's one aspect to look at. The second, as we said, was the political aspect. Dhaka was India's most reliable ally in South Asia. But Yunus is aligning with Islamabad. In September, he pushed for the revival of SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. That is SAARC. It's sort of like South Asia's ASEAN. Now, India firmly is opposed to this move. But guess who is supporting it? Pakistan. So Dhaka and Islamabad are increasingly finding themselves on the same page. This should worry officials in New Delhi. Having said that, India does have a few cards to play, like trade. India-Bangladesh trade is more than $13 billion. Pakistan-Bangladesh trade, only $800 million. That's a big advantage for India. Plus, India and Bangladesh have been cooperating for 50 years. You cannot catch up in weeks or months. So the key for India is to ride out this tough period. We saw that in the Maldives as well. The whole India out agenda is fading. Eventually, Dhaka too will have to accept this geopolitical reality. What will be Donald Trump's first act as president? It may be the declaration of a national emergency because Trump wants to keep his election promise. So on his first day in office, he plans to order mass deportations. And he will deploy the U.S. military for this. Says who? Well, the man himself. The president-elect put this out on social media on his own platform, which is called Truth Social. And when he says mass deportations, how many people is he talking about? It could be millions of people. That's what Trump's team says. Listen to this.
We're going to see a large number, by the millions, of self-deportations as well. And so these are pragmatic places to start. That would give us, yes, the largest mass deportation in American history.
Obviously, you cannot deport millions of people in a single day, but Donald Trump wants to start big. He wants to make a splash on day one. So he's focusing on picking a team that can do the job. He's appointing loyalists to handle deportations, like Kristi Noem, who will lead the Department of Homeland Security. This is the agency which deports illegals from the United States. Then we have Tom Homan, who has been named Trump's border czar. So the team is in place, but do they have a plan? How will they go about it? Who will they target first? Reports say people from 4 countries are on Donald Trump's radar. 4 countries: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Joe Biden had rolled out a special policy for these 4 countries. Their citizens could enter America without a visa. They had to fulfill some other criteria. They had to clear a vetting process, get an American citizen to sponsor them, and then they could come without a visa. Nearly 530,000 migrants benefited from this policy. They could live and work in America for 2 years. Trump now wants to expel them. He plans to wind up this program when he takes office. Plus, he'll sign some executive orders to widen the deportation net to make sure more people can be thrown out. This could include pumping more money into enforcement agencies, hiring more officers for deportation, and building vast holding facilities or staging centers, places where you can hold migrants until they're sent back. And to do all of this, he plans to deploy the U.S. military. Now, this proposal has triggered controversy because this would mean troops on American soil, American troops on American soil. To do this, Donald Trump will have to use emergency powers. He will have to declare a national emergency, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, is an extreme step and will most likely be challenged in court.
The reality will hit the government and the new government on day one of what they can do or what they cannot. They may have plans. I don't believe that they will be easy for them to implement anything.
But this is unlikely to deter Trump. He has seen more than his fair share of legal challenges. Even in his first term in office, many of his immigration policies were struck down by courts. This time, though, he can hope for a better strike rate and more favorable verdicts because of the judges that he appointed. Before leaving office in 2021, Trump had appointed more than 200 federal judges. They're still around. Plus, the Supreme Court has a conservative majority. 6 out of 9 judges in the U.S. Supreme Court were appointed by the Republicans. So this time, the odds are stacked against Trump's rivals, also against countries like Mexico.
If we had a war with a country like Mexico, we wouldn't lose people like that. This is bigger than a war.
Illegal immigration is a bigger challenge than a war. That's what Donald Trump says. And most illegal immigrants enter America through land borders from neighboring countries, so Trump wants to build pressure on them. Reports say he could restrict visas. Just like he uses tariffs on the trade front, Trump could leverage American visas and extract concessions from neighbors. Basically, he's looking to weaponize the U.S. immigration policy. It's a typical Trump move, and it should surprise no one, honestly. He promised to be tough on immigrants. He was voted to power on this plank, and now he plans to walk the talk. Today marks 1,000 days since the Ukraine war began. 1,000 days of war, tens of thousands of lives lost and billions of dollars burnt up. This war has cost the world a fortune. We've all paid the price, one way or the other, but some countries have paid far more than everyone else. Countries like the United States of America, they've poured billions into defending Ukraine. Other Western nations have contributed too, but it's America that has kept this war going. And now America wants to stop. Donald Trump is coming back to power. He says that he wants this war to end immediately. So Ukraine and President Volodymyr Zelensky are on a timer. They have till January 20th to do what they can before Trump pulls the plug. They have 2 months. The current U.S. President Joe Biden is firmly in Zelensky's corner, and it seems that Biden is giving Kiev a parting gift: the permission to conduct long-range strikes, to attack deep inside Russian territory. Biden has finally given the go-ahead so Zelensky can use American ATACMS missiles against Russia. They can fire the ATACMS at military bases and airfields located within Russia's borders. Now, this is a massive escalation, and Biden is facing flack for it from the Trump team. Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., has put out this post. It says, and I'm quoting, "The military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III going before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives." He says this will lead to World War III, and if it happens, Trump may not be able to stop it. The U.S. has not officially confirmed that it has given the green light, neither has Ukraine, but Zelensky issued this statement.
Today, there's a lot of talk in the media about us receiving permission for respective actions, but strikes are not carried out with words. Such things are not announced. Missiles will speak for themselves. They certainly will.
That's basically an admission. He has effectively confirmed that he has been given the go-ahead. And reports say that his missiles have already started speaking. Russia says that Ukraine has fired 6 ATACMS. They've reportedly struck an ammunition depot in Russia's Bryansk region. Moscow is furious. The Kremlin issued a warning today. Listen to this.
The Russian Federation reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in the event of aggression using conventional weapons against it or the Republic of Belarus as a member state of the Union State, which creates a critical threat to their sovereignty or territorial integrity. Aggression against the Russian Federation by any non-nuclear state with the participation or support of a nuclear state is considered as their joint attack.
Russia updated its nuclear doctrine today. President Vladimir Putin signed a decree broadening the scope of using nukes. It's a stark warning to Ukraine and the West. That is the situation as of today, 1,000 days into the war. So the next 2 months are critical. Zelensky will push forward. We don't know how Putin will respond, but nukes are definitely on the table. All we know for sure is that Trump is about to inherit a mess that his European allies will try and stop him from cleaning it up.
We have to ramp up the defense industry, and luckily NATO and the EU are working closely together to make sure that the defense industrial base, transatlantic, will be strengthened over the coming months. We really have to do this, to replenish our stockpiles, to make sure that we stand ready to oppose any adversary.
Like Biden, Europe is also trying to Trump-proof the war. They want to ramp up their own defense industry to a point that they can sustain Ukraine's war effort even without American support. Now, this poses a different problem for Trump. He may not be keen to pull out without ending the war, because no matter how justified he may be, Trump will be slammed if he leaves Ukraine to its fate without ending the war. So Europe increasing support to Ukraine could be a ploy, a way to keep Trump tangled. Let's see if it works. By now, some of you may be wondering, why is the West so obsessed with prolonging the war? Why would they escalate it? By allowing Ukraine to strike into Russia. Do they really think that Ukraine can win? Well, probably not on the battlefield, but the West is hoping for a different kind of victory. They want Russia to crumble from within, economically, making the war too costly to sustain. They haven't succeeded yet. Russia's economic growth last year was more than some European countries, but cracks are appearing. There's a cost of living crisis. Inflation in Russia is about 10%. What's worse is the food inflation. Reports like this have begun doing the rounds. The price of butter, meat and onions has risen by 25% over the last year, and 25% food inflation is no joke anywhere in the world. It leads to pain for all sections of society. And it has also led to a rise in theft. So Russian stores are reportedly locking butter up so that people don't steal it. This does point to an economic problem. But will it become a crisis big enough to cripple Russia? We'll have to wait and see. The final countdown is on. Ukraine has 2 months to deal damage. Europe has 2 months to find a way to keep America in the war. And Russia just has to hold on in this time before it walks away with a victory. Now let's turn to Brazil, which is hosting this year's G20 summit. Last year, India was the host nation. It pulled off a very successful summit and passed on the baton to Brazil. So this time, all the G20 members and guest nations have gathered in Rio de Janeiro, including India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's top number 2 in his 3-nation tour. He was in Nigeria over the weekend, and he heads to Guyana tomorrow. So Prime Minister Modi does not have much time in Brazil, but he's making the most of what he has, with as many meetings as possible. 10 bilaterals over the course of 2 days, with a range of countries and leaders. Old friends like French President Emmanuel Macron and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and new ones like British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Indonesia's Prabowo Subianto. It's been a whirlwind G20 for the Indian Prime Minister. Our next report brings you the highlights.
The annual G20 summit is taking place in Brazil this year, in Rio de Janeiro. The G20 stands for Group of 20. There are 19 member countries and 2 blocs, the European Union and the African Union. The AU joined last year, so the members now add up to 21. But no one's in a hurry to change the name. So it's still the G20. This is a group photo from the event, taken earlier today. You'll see most of the G20 leaders there, though 3 prominent ones are missing. U.S. President Joe Biden, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. They were having a trilateral meeting and got delayed, so they ended up missing the family photo. Now, with that trivia out of the way, let's look at what's actually happening there, keeping the focus on India's activities. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has had a jam-packed schedule. He's taking part in 10 bilateral meetings over the course of 2 days. He held 6 bilaterals yesterday, 2 earlier today, and he has another 2 coming up. The bilaterals covered a range of countries. The first one was with France. This is the French President Emmanuel Macron's 3rd meeting with PM Modi this year. Their talks focused on the India-France strategic partnership, especially in areas like defense, space and nuclear energy. PM Modi's second meeting was with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This was their first ever meeting. PM Modi has met with Starmer's predecessors. There have been a lot over the few years, but this was the first Modi-Starmer meet, and it seems to have gone well. Starmer wants to resume free trade negotiations with India. The countries have been trying to work out a free trade deal for years. Negotiations began back in 2022. But they've been on hold since March because of elections. Both India and the UK had general elections this year, so the talks were put on hold. Now the new British government wants to resume them. The deal could open both markets and supercharge trade between India and the UK, so it's a priority for both nations. PM Modi also met Italian PM Giorgia Meloni yesterday. It was their 5th meeting in the last 2 years. They announced a new action plan after the bilateral, called the Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025 to 29. It outlines what India and Italy will work on over the next 5 years. So the leaders plan to keep up their collaboration in the years ahead. PM Modi also met the leaders of Norway, Portugal and Indonesia yesterday. This was his first meeting with Portugal's Luis Montenegro, who was elected in April, and Indonesia's Prabowo Subianto, who took office last month. Indonesia is a fellow G20 member nation, so it's essential to maintain good ties. The meeting with Norway and Portugal showed that India is looking beyond its traditional partners. Today, Prime Minister Modi met with the host, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. As the host, Brazil set the agenda at this year's G20 summit. The country wants to build a global alliance against hunger and poverty, and India has promised to fully support the initiative. PM Modi's other meetings today are with Chilean President Gabriel Boric, Argentina's Javier Milei, and Australian PM Anthony Albanese. As you can see, it's been a hectic G20 summit for PM Modi. Proof of India's growing political stature.
This year's G20 was also a battleground for an India-China race. And the prize? Leadership of the Global South. Both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping talked about it. Let's look at the statements first. Here's what the Indian Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting. Countries of the Global South are most adversely impacted by the food, fuel and fertilizer crisis caused by global conflicts. So our decisions can only be successful when we keep in mind the challenges and priorities of the Global South. So Prime Minister Modi spoke up for developing nations, as did Xi Jinping. He pitched China as a reliable partner to the Global South. Listen to what he said.
China has always been a member of the Global South, a reliable and long-term partner of developing countries, and an activist and doer in support of global development. China does not seek to be a single player, but rather hopes that 100 flowers will blossom and that it will work hand in hand with the vast number of developing countries to achieve modernization.
How about that? Two countries with more than 1 billion people, two giant neighbors and two economic powerhouses, both fighting for the same prize, the opportunity to lead the Global South. And Xi Jinping is going the extra mile. He outlined 8 steps to help Global South countries. It includes his Belt and Road project, of course, and also a science coalition, one that will funnel new technology to developing nations. Chinese state media is going even further. They have published a survey on the G20, and they say, listen to this, they say citizens from around the world were polled. Look at the findings. Almost 93% said that China has made significant contributions to the Global South. More than 91% said that China is a strong force in development. I must say, these are high numbers, almost as high as Xi Jinping's approval ratings and probably just as real. But what explains this desperation from China? Why are they so eager to please the Global South? Well, think back to last year. India hosted the G20 summit in New Delhi. It began with the African Union being invited to the table. That's a group of 55 countries. And India managed to give them a place at the G20. Global South leaders praised Prime Minister Modi for this decision. And where was Xi Jinping? Not even in the country. He skipped the summit due to his rivalry with India. Clearly, he's keen to avoid a repeat of that, and that's one reason for the desperation. He wants to be back in the game. Secondly, China's reputation has taken a beating. Just look at what happened in Sri Lanka, or what's happening in Kenya, Pakistan, or Laos. Chinese loans have saddled these countries with unsustainable debt. Most of them are unable to repay the loans, so governments are wary of China's promises. They're weighing their options. Brazil, for example, is ditching plans to join the BRI. And third, China's economy is virtually stalled. The days of record growth are gone. Meanwhile, India is picking pace. It's the fastest growing major economy in the world. So Xi Jinping is doing damage control. He's telling the Global South, don't leave us. We can still help you. The question is, will it be enough? While China faltered, India has made gains. New Delhi hosted 3 Global South summits. China was not invited to any of them. Prime Minister Modi also made trips to expand India's footprint in the developing world, like in Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Laos, and now Nigeria and Guyana. China has been wary of these moves. Their state media has tried to discredit India's campaign. How? By saying that India is an extension of the West. As you know, Western countries colonized most of the Global South, and being linked to them is a disadvantage. That's what the Chinese media is telling the world. Thankfully, no one is buying this propaganda. Global South countries appreciate India's principled position on global conflicts. They also look up to India's democratic experiment. It's something that they want to replicate. Having said that, this race is not over. China's economic footprint is a lot bigger than India's. Xi Jinping highlighted that in Brazil. He said China's imports from developing countries will hit $8 trillion between now and 2030. $8 trillion. India cannot match that. Nor can it match Chinese investments and loans. Instead, India has focused on building partnerships and transparency. Ideally, both countries would lead the global south together. But China is not big on sharing. Their predatory loans have already harmed the developing world. Let's see if India can capitalize on that. Let's shift to Delhi now, which frankly no one should, because that's how bad the air is. The average AQI reading in the city is 488, almost 5 times the advised levels. But don't worry, our politicians are on the job. They're making memes to mock each other. They're trading blame and organizing PR stunts. Maybe if they keep us entertained enough, we won't notice the toxic air. But honestly, where are the solutions? Today, Delhi's Environment Minister had an idea. He wants artificial rain. It's a very complicated process. First, you inject salts into the air. The salts combine water droplets in the cloud. These droplets become snowflakes and fall to the ground, and once close to the surface, they melt to form rain. The Delhi government is pushing this idea. They want artificial rain, but it has to be cleared by the central government. And even then, it's not a reliable solution because rains can reduce air pollution, but the effect only lasts for 48 to 72 hours. After that, the AQI will rise again. Plus, this process is a bit of a hit or miss. You need the weather to be perfectly aligned. If not, cloud seeding will not work. All of this makes it an unreliable option. Instead, let's look at solutions that could actually deliver. Number one, tracking stubble burning. Stubble burning makes up 38% of Delhi's pollution. But you know what data says? It says stubble burning in Punjab has fallen in the last 5 years. How is that possible? Well, some believe that farmers are fooling the system. You see, satellite images are used to track farm fires. Satellite images track stubble burning. These satellites pass over India at a fixed time, between 1:30 and 2 p.m. So the farmers simply postpone the fires. They wait for the satellite to pass and then begin burning. The solution? Just don't look at fires. Look at the extent of burnt area. That would give you a better idea. Solution number two is avoiding stubble burning altogether. And yes, it is possible. The Indian Council of Agriculture Research has developed an alternative. It's called the Pusa decomposer. It's basically a liquid solution. Farmers don't have to burn the stalks anymore. They can simply spray this liquid on the field. It will naturally decompose the stalks into manure. Then why aren't the farmers using it? Because a lot of them don't even know about it. Some of them do, but they doubt its efficiency. Clearly, governments need to spread the word. Maybe try out some incentives too. But that's not the only issue here. We just mentioned the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. They're short on funding. They get 0.2% of the national budget. Compare this to developed countries. Such agencies get close to 1% of the budget. So the bottom line is we must spend on innovation and research. Now to solution number 3, promoting electric vehicles. Your normal cars and bikes make up 25% of polluting particles, sometimes even 35%. The Delhi government introduced an EV policy in the year 2020. They waived road taxes on electric vehicles. And that made EVs cheaper by 10%. But the waiver was withdrawn in September this year. So EV sales are down again. India's total EV incentives are worth $1.3 billion. Do you know how much it is in China? $72 billion. In the US, it is more than $2 billion per year. The next solution, solution number 4, is covering construction materials and demolition sites. This was suggested by IIT Kanpur and it sounds ludicrously simple. We've all seen trucks carrying sand and bricks or cement piled up at construction sites. Experts say these must be covered at all times. Doing this can improve air quality by 50%. All you need is strict checks and regular patrols. And finally, solution number 5, spend money on new technologies. Consider power plants and refineries. There are 11 coal plants within 300 kilometers of Delhi. They emit 281 kilotons of sulfur dioxide. It's a tiny but lethal pollutant, sulfur dioxide. Experts say that these plants should be fitted with special filters. And doing so can reduce sulfur dioxide emissions by 67%. So why hasn't this been done? Only the governments can answer. Back in 2019, India unveiled the National Clean Air Program. It covers 131 Indian cities. The National Clean Air Program. The target was to reduce pollution by 40% by 2026. Just one problem though, governments are not utilizing this money. Delhi and Noida have used up less than 40% of the allocated funds. Imagine that. You've been given funds to reduce pollution. You keep complaining about it, yet you're not spending 60% of the money set aside for it. If this isn't political apathy, what is? Countries around the world have shown that you can tackle pollution, but you need to check 3 boxes: spending, innovation, and political will. I'm afraid all 3 are lacking in Delhi. Now let's talk about Meta, one of the biggest internet companies in the world and a major player in the Indian market. But here, Meta has suffered a setback. India's competition watchdog has slapped them with a fine. Meta has been asked to pay over $25 million. What for? For antitrust violations. This case involves WhatsApp. It's about how Meta uses WhatsApp data across its other platforms, like Facebook and Instagram. India's Competition Commission has issued specific directions. It has asked Meta to stop sharing user data for advertising. Meta disagrees with the ruling. It plans to appeal against it. Here's a report.
WhatsApp is the most popular messaging platform in India. Over 500 million Indians use WhatsApp every day. That's more users than any other country in the world. It's fair to say WhatsApp is indispensable for many Indians. WhatsApp's outsized influence also makes it a target for scrutiny. The Competition Commission is India's antitrust watchdog. It has been looking into WhatsApp. The trigger was a notification from 2021. WhatsApp had made some changes to its privacy policy. The changes allowed for sharing of WhatsApp data between other platforms of Meta like Facebook. The move had sparked global scrutiny, and India was no different. After 3 years, the Competition Commission has concluded its probe. It has asked WhatsApp to not share user data with other Meta services, specifically for running advertising. The curbs have been ordered for 5 years. Meta has also been asked to pay a fine, over 200 crore rupees or around $25 million. Meta has defended itself. The platform says it never forced users to accept data sharing. It plans to appeal against the decision of the watchdog. But Meta isn't the only one facing questions from the antitrust regulator. Other leading internet platforms are under the scanner too, like Google. In March, the antitrust body ordered a probe. The focus was the in-app fees charged by Google on the Play Store. They have been a subject of heated debate and significant outrage within the Indian tech ecosystem. The Play Store is the go-to platform for Android apps on smartphones. Just like how WhatsApp dominates instant messaging, Android too enjoys a commanding position within the Indian market. Most smartphone users in India use an Android mobile phone. This makes Google Play Store essential. Earlier this year, over 100 Indian apps were removed from Play Store. The dispute was over the fee that Google charges these apps for users' purchases. Google's cut can range between 11 to 26% for every transaction made. Indian startups find this fee extremely high. iPhone maker Apple too faces similar scrutiny. In July, Indian regulators opened a probe. They are looking into Apple's own App Store. The watchdog says the App Store is an unavoidable trading partner for app developers, and they have no choice but to accept Apple's terms, including Apple's billing and payment system. The Indian antitrust scrutiny is far from unique. Tech giants across the world are facing similar cases that involve their ecosystems and business practices. India's antitrust watchdog simply reflects a growing global trend.
Have you heard of the Hong Kong 47? This is a group of 47 people, activists, legislators, even professors. Since 2014, they have led a pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. These were public faces, protesting on the streets, resisting Beijing's crackdown on the city of Hong Kong. 47 people. Today, 45 of them were sentenced to prison. They were found guilty of plotting to overthrow the government. The jail terms range from 4 to 10 years. This is Hong Kong's biggest national security case.
I think different people may have different judgment about whether sentencing is appropriate. But I think the important point is the rule of law. If anyone commit offense, be it national security offense or other offenses, there is sufficient evidence and then we will prosecute.
So what led to this? Are the pro-democracy protests a thing of the past now? And does this mark the slow death of Hong Kong? To answer this, let's look at history. Hong Kong was a British colony for more than 150 years. In the year 1997, the UK returned Hong Kong to China. And back then, Beijing made a promise that Hong Kong would get 50 years of autonomy. 1997, they promised 50 years of autonomy. They said Hong Kong could keep their capitalism and democracy. It was called one country, two systems. But then China went back on its word. In 2014, Beijing issued a new diktat. They said Hong Kong could still choose its leaders, but with a caveat. The people of Hong Kong could select only from a list of pre-approved candidates. Candidates approved by China, only those candidates could be elected. The people of Hong Kong rejected this move. They demanded free elections. Tens of thousands gathered on the streets. They came armed with umbrellas. Umbrellas were meant to protect themselves from the tear gas and pepper spray that was being used by the police. And this earned the protests a new name. It was called the Umbrella Movement. It lasted for about 79 days. It exposed China's true intentions. Things settled down for a bit after that. In 2019, Beijing struck again. It framed a new law for Hong Kong, a national security law, which called for strict punishment for anything anti-China. Activists could be extradited to Beijing, election candidates could be banned, and critical media could be raided. So the protesters returned to the streets, more than 1 million of them. They began with peaceful marches, but soon things spun out of control. Protesters were shot at. There was widespread vandalism and clashes with the security forces. Hong Kong was on the edge. China called it terrorism. And unlike 2014, this time in 2019, China did not step back. It cracked down, and this crackdown was brutal. 1 year later, Beijing passed the law, the final nail in Hong Kong's democracy coffin, the national security law. Politicians were arrested, so were activists. Many fled the country seeking asylum in the West. Hong Kong banned protest anthems. Any act of dissent was met with strict punishment, and today's trial sums it up. Excessive punishment to set a precedent.
Regarding today's ruling, I would not say it is too little or too much, because today's sentencing, for the 600,000 people who took part in the primary election, for the 2 million people who participated in the anti-extradition movement, today's sentencing is already suppression.
This trial marks the slow death of Hong Kong. The city has changed since 2019, and it has changed for the worse. In September, a man was sentenced to 14 months in jail. Do you know why? What was his crime? Wearing a T-shirt with a protest slogan. 14 months in jail. Hong Kong is also installing thousands of surveillance cameras, ostensibly to fight crime, but actually to snoop on people. Hong Kong is now a mini China. Their government behaves like Beijing's spy state. But Hong Kongers still do not identify as Chinese. Look at this survey. In 2009, nearly 38% called themselves Chinese. 2009. Then in 2019, that number fell to 11%. There's a rise in anti-China sentiment. Until some time back, there were open calls for Hong Kong's independence in some quarters, but now it seems like a pipe dream. In the early 2000s, Hong Kong was free. Of course, it was still part of China. At the same time, it had a distinct culture, a distinct system. Money flowed into the city. Surveillance was low. There was freedom to protest. And Beijing was not breathing down their neck. All of that changed in 2019. So where does this leave Hong Kong? The city once symbolized freedom, prosperity and resilience. Today it stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly liberties can be lost. With Beijing's grip tightening, its future looks uncertain. Now let's talk about Minecraft. It's a video game, probably the most popular in the world. In 2024, it sold over 300 million copies. But that's not enough for Minecraft. It is now moving from pixels to parks, theme parks. Minecraft has signed a global theme park deal worth $110 million. The deal is with Merlin Entertainments. Together, they will turn digital dreams into physical experiences. But why theme parks? How do they help build brands? What is it about them that can transform brands into cultural icons? Here's a report.
Minecraft. It's the world's best-selling video game. But now it's stepping out of the screen and into the real world. Minecraft has struck a deal with Merlin Entertainments. It's Europe's largest theme park operator, the second biggest globally after Disney. The deal is valued at over $110 million. Together, they'll create themed attractions, rides and hotel rooms starting in the UK and US by 2026. With over 300 million copies sold, Minecraft is not just a game, it's a global phenomenon. But now it's moving from the virtual to the tangible. Its partnership with Merlin is part of a broader brand extension strategy. For Merlin, Minecraft represents the next crown jewel in its portfolio, joining other IP giants like Lego. By aligning with iconic brands, Merlin enhances the appeal of its theme parks. Which brings us to theme parks itself. What makes them so special? Yes, they are indeed entertainment hubs, but of late they are powerful platforms for brand growth and engagement. Take Disney, for example. Its parks bring beloved characters and stories to life, fostering deeper emotional connections and, in the end, creating lifelong fans. Then there's the revenue part of it. Parks generate money through ticket sales, merchandise, food and lodging. They provide brands with an additional, often lucrative business vertical. Take Disney Experiences, for example. In 2023, the parks earned over $33 billion. There's also Universal's Harry Potter attractions. They generate millions every year just by selling themed merchandise from wands to butterbeer. This creates a new touchpoint for fans while also reaching untapped audiences. Successful theme parks cement a brand's place in cultural history. They become iconic destinations, drawing millions of tourists annually, boosting brand visibility and lifting the economy, like Disney World in Orlando. It makes Florida a top tourist destination. These parks also expose a brand to new people. That helps expand its audience. For example, a family visiting Lego Park is more likely to leave with a Lego set compared to if they head to a toy store. So Minecraft's venture aims to capitalize on this. It wants to blend its digital world with physical spaces. Dubbed Adventures Made Real, the short-term plan is to take over an existing theme park or create new city centers. Over the years, it will expand this strategic partnership, moving to new countries and setting up parks. So Minecraft is building one block at a time, with one foot in the virtual world and the other in reality. The adventure begins in 2026, and the possibilities are endless.
You can't see it or smell it, but you can sense it. It is easily stamped out, it is hard to define, it isn't a school subject, but it can be learned. It is teachable, and when harnessed, it flourishes. Guess what I'm talking about? Creativity. It is a delicate, intangible, but crucial quality. Creativity helps us thrive mentally and emotionally in our career and in our life, and especially in our student life, in our formative years. But sometimes creativity goes missing in our classrooms. Schools are results driven. There is enormous pressure on students as well as teachers. They have to achieve quantifiable results. For years, this has meant stressful tests and uninspired teaching in stuffy classrooms. But luckily, things are changing, at least in some places. Many teachers are putting the fun back in learning. Creativity is taking center stage, and old, boring techniques are inviting play. Take Kochi, for example, a city in India's southern state of Kerala. Here, primary schools have ditched grades. Instead, kids are being given emojis. So maybe a skull emoji instead of an F grade, and heart eyes instead of an A. Basically, teachers are taking the trauma out of tests and replacing it with some light-hearted drama. After all, emojis are easy to understand and they're fun. They form a living language, one of the fastest growing languages in the world, by the way. And children understand it, teachers are learning it. So emojis are ubiquitous in this educational evolution. Take the UK, for instance, where a growing number of schools are using emojis to help children understand literature. Students read Shakespeare, then summarize the text using emojis. Teachers say it helps them connect with stories and express what they learn simply and creatively. Schools in Australia are widely using emojis as well. Children send emojis to give feedback to schools. Now, we aren't sure how good an idea this is. Imagine if schools ask children about the new lunch plan and receive a vomit emoji in response. But bad jokes aside, research shows that emojis are good for students. They help kids express better. And when text and emojis go together, students can understand concepts better. Plus, this is an opportunity to foster creativity. So in India and elsewhere, teachers are adopting emojis in classrooms. They're trying to speak the language of children. I'll give you another example. Instagram Reels and TikToks. They can disrupt learning, but they can also be used as tools for learning. 1 in 4 people use social media for education, apparently. So teachers are going on TikTok and doing a deep dive on boring topics in fun ways. They're even showing students what their dreams could look like in reality by using AI filters of a doctor, a footballer, and so on. And it's not just about technology. Take Reggio Emilia, for instance. This is an Italian province. It is considered legendary in the world of education. It has appended the education framework. Here, students help make the curriculum. Students work with artists, teachers, and researchers. So it is learning for the students by the students. So be it emojis and AI or a curriculum overhaul, any passionate teacher will tell you this: it is possible for education to nurture learning, to boost critical thinking, collaboration, imagination, empathy, to teach students in ways that they will enjoy. Yes, it is a big ask, and there is no one way to do it. But the path leading to it is usually filled with play and creativity. If you live in Delhi, these are tough times for you. All you can think about is the pollution. But hey, look at the upside. You don't need Instagram filters anymore. The toxic air does it for you. Everything looks yellow and smoky. People here are checking the AQI like stock market prices. And unlike the markets, they're hoping it's down. And I know we discussed some solutions tonight, but those will not happen overnight. Our best bet is perhaps the winter of 2025. That's when those changes may kick in. Until then, perhaps humor is the best medicine. Social media users are roasting Delhi and its people. Combined with the smoke, it's a nice little barbecue on the internet. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Thousands rally outside New Zealand's parliament over a bill that seeks to reinterpret a historic Maori treaty. Berlin unveils its new Christmas lights inspired by the city's club scene, and Saudi Arabia unveils the design of the stadium that will host the 2034 FIFA World Cup. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1977, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat visited Israel. He was the first Arab leader to do so. Sadat addressed the Israeli Knesset, calling for an end to the Arab-Israeli conflict. In 1979, Egypt signed a peace treaty with Israel, becoming the first Arab state to officially recognize Israel. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.